We're
Woohoo!
live. They
We're
really don't do a
live.
countdown anymore. It's like, boom, you're in.
Yeah. It was funny. Yesterday, I decided I wanted to make a meme that's like 90% of people's faces when they realize that they're live. It's always like, whoa, yay, we're live. It's like this
Oh, I
reaction
love
of
that.
just so shocked that technology works this way or something.
Yeah, the world needs that. I think we need that.
Exactly. The world does need that. So, speaking of, our year is starting with a lot more zest and zeal than it did last year, isn't that for sure? We're just laughing as we get going here. I love it.
And it's January, so that's pretty good going.
Yeah,
Positive
it's
emotions
almost,
in January. Who knew?
yeah, exactly. And it's the end of January. So, we've made it through the point where most people give up on themselves.
Exactly.
Not that that's you and I, but I'm just saying. Oh, awesome. So today's topic is around that, saying goodbye to BS and making 2023 our year of unfiltered abundance.
Oh, that's glorious.
Unfiltered abundance, which when you came out with those words, it was like, oh my goodness. It just felt, resonant throughout my whole system. What does unfiltered
Yeah.
abundance mean to you?
Well, so I think I've been on a bit of a journey with it because I've been talking on my podcast, the Seven Figure Consultant podcast, about scarcity and abundance for some time. But when I looked back, I was like, do you know what? I talk about scarcity and recognizing scarcity and noticing it, becoming aware of it. But the thing is, that's only half of the picture. The thing that we really need to be doing is stepping into abundance. And so I actually closed out my year on my other show. The podcast that I did, the last one in December, was called Yes to Everything, Your Year of Abundance in 2023. And that, I don't know, that felt so energetically like the right thing for me, for my audience in that moment, because I think it's great to notice scarcity. It's great to sort of go on a bit of a scarcity hunt and like do the work. But the second part of that is absolutely stepping into abundance and starting to make that something which is tangible, that we can feel, but like we can see the impact of it in our businesses, in our lives, in ourselves. I think it's an absolute game changer.
And interestingly enough, if what we focus on expands, right? So if we focus on the scarcity, we're basically in energy telling the universe we want more scarcity, as opposed to focusing on what we do want and almost like zooming in on the things that are abundant and great, and then zooming into them so that we can have more of it. And I've really made it a point as well, just in the last several months, well, the last several weeks especially, to focus in on what I'm grateful for, even if it's and for me, it's doing that at the middle of the day and at the end of the day. Because the morning, I don't really have a problem with my morning routine, but it's that by the midday, if I've had a not so great morning or whatever, if I've just had some meetings that were sort of blasé, I sit there at lunch and I really unplug from things and I say, okay, what are 2 or 3 things I can be grateful for? And how can I reach out? This is for me to exemplify my value of love. How can I reach out and just send somebody a message to say how much I appreciate them? And then take 2 minutes of looking in the mirror and really having a self-love conversation. So those are things that I've been doing to really focus in on that abundance, because like you said, I think it's important to be aware of our scarcity blind spots. And if we focus on that all the time instead of what we intend and what we want, we're just going to keep getting more of that stuff that we don't want.
Yeah, because you can't say to the universe, not that, because then the very act of naming it, that becomes the thing that you are unconsciously
The universe,
in.
some say the universe doesn't recognize the word not or no.
Exactly.
So it doesn't even hear that. It's just saying, oh, you want that?
Yeah. And so I don't know, I think it's good to define our terms. We're talking about how important it is to be specific about the fact that we want abundance. What does abundance mean to you, Meghann?
Yes, that's great. I love that. So for me, what it means is having a full life that is well blended in what I want to create. So I've been intentional throughout most of my existence running the Dames with what all the different areas of my life that I want to have abundance in, because we often tend to just focus on it as, okay, I want personal, I want abundance in my personal and professional finances. And we do want to make sure also that we take people's comments. So if you have comments or questions, we forgot to say this, please put them in the chat wherever you are, and we will get them. But just a couple of areas I'm looking at, sort of a vision board that I created last year, having abundance in creativity, personal growth, friendship, openness, well-being, humor and fun, clarity, adaptability, entrepreneurship, and health. So for me, it's having abundance in all of those different areas. And I have sort of behaviors that I've defined that help me feel abundant in those spaces. So feel like I am in the fullness of myself, whatever that means to me. So it's more of a feeling inside than it is, which of course then ripples out and has effect on things like things like money, things like love, things like relationships going well, etc. When we're not really feeling the feeling of abundance, it tends to reflect in everything that we do as well, bringing more scarcity. What about you?
Absolutely.
What about you? How would you define abundance?
I think for me, it's kind of, it's the constant ability to reframe. And every time I look at something and it's tempting to be like, oh, that's gone wrong, or like, oh, that's like an energy drain. It's like kind of see the positive, see the real like view of things, because I think it's tempting to feel like, oh, scarcity tells the true story. This is something that I've actually learned through some mindset work that I've been doing, and it's rapid transformational therapy. Is kind of the label on the box, but like what it does, it's like starting to replace thought patterns in your brain. And when I started doing it, I was very fearful that I would start believing delusional things that weren't true. As I've been doing it, I've realized that it's helping me to stop believing the delusional negative things that I used to listen to in my brain all the time that weren't true. So it's kind of, abundance to me is like being able to tap into that higher self, the one who's like, this is going extremely well. Can you see that it is? But also being able to see the opportunity in every situation. I think like abundance, we love to equate it with money. It's great when that happens. Making money, I think, is one of the most fun things there is out there. I find it hugely energizing. I love it. But it's more than that. And I think it's kind of, if to quote from like Gay Hendricks' book, The Big Leap, he says like, how much love do you want to feel? And I remember when I first read it, I'm a Brit, and we're like, oh, I don't know, what's that about? But actually, the more that you commit to that work, like the more that you get rewarding relationships. I'm not saying that you never get like problems in relationships or scarcity of relationships or whatever, but actually I've definitely noticed the quality and intensity of some of the key relationships that are important to me really increasing. So I think it has to be energy as well, doesn't it? Because that's so important. Like how we feel all day, every day is such a powerful indicator of what's going on in our mindset. So yeah, to me, it's a mix of all of those things.
Speaking of, that's a perfect segue to talk about, how we are dealing with the challenges that come to face us, and how we make our businesses work for us, not against us. And I think that letting go of the BS that we dealt with last year, the year before, whenever it was for you, listeners, for me, I'll speak for me, sorry. Last year was a ginormous poop show. And it was just not, but I'll talk a little bit more about that. But the point is, how do we really look at and deal with the challenges that are in our faces without doing spiritual bypassing and without actually facing it? Because that is a problem, I think, that a lot of us deal with. And I'm fully aware of and convinced that last year I just needed to be a massive pile of anxiety for a good 6 months of the year in order to really fully experience and go through the eye of the needle of anxiety. And that was anxiety on all levels, from a personal and professional standpoint, in every area of my life. And that was what I needed to feel. If I had tried to, I did in the beginning, I tried to just not feel it anymore. I tried to, but I don't drink anymore. So there was no numbing. There were times when there were things that I would try and it was like, oh, now it's turning up. Interesting. The anxiety is turning up because I needed to experience it. I needed to truly feel it. And there was so much that I learned from that space. But facing it a lot of times means that we have to actually go through it. And we have, because it's there for a reason, so we can't bypass it. And at those times, I knew that I needed to, for instance, step back from being in the limelight of my business, from being the face of it, because I was full of anxiety. And I know that people can feel that because we're all energetic beings. And so there was a lot of the times when I would just do a lot more of stepping back, and which is great because then my team could step forward. But the joyful, playful Meghann that was in the beginning of last year and before was kind of absent a lot last year. And I had to be okay with that. And I think that I did a pretty good job despite everything that I was dealing with. But, we'll talk about where I'm going from here. But what about you in terms of when you're thinking about dealing with those challenges that you face so that we can make our businesses work for us?
Yeah, definitely. Well, firstly, I just want to say hello to Alistair and to Arpit who are listening in. Thank you for commenting. It's great to have you with us.
Welcome.
It's really funny you say that because I had a really similar experience, actually. Just had like an episode of like severe anxiety. And I'm saying like severe, like, I don't know, I don't really let my business get affected when stuff is going on with me. And I don't know if this is a good thing. I think it is. I've got quite good at like being like quite a hot mess behind the scenes and actually still being able to do everything. I've set up my business like basically from a place of like almost fear that life would be too much and that I would run out of energy. I'd been through burnout very severely at quite a young age, at the age of 27. So I think that has been like a theme in my business. Like I want a business that is not going to be impossible for me to run when there might be like mental health stuff going on in the background that, I've had all kinds of stuff happen since I started my business 9 years ago. So in a sense, and it's so interesting you say that, Meghann, because I think I probably did have about 6 months of intense anxiety where like I just remember saying to my therapist, I am so tired of breathing exercises. Like, seriously, when did life get like this? But at the same time, it really helped me to embed like really like strong daily practices. And it was a few things together. We got a dog for the first time. We've always been cat people, but we got a dog in the summer of 2021. And so coming into like this time last year, I'd already been like in a routine of going for a walk for about an hour every day. And I did have a point where I was like, this is actually amazing, because I can remember there was a point when I was like, I really wish that I could go out walking every day, but I never seemed to make it happen. And like for me, like we've got the kind of dog who, if you don't walk her, she's going to eat like a chair or something.
Everything. Yeah.
So, exactly. So like it has to be done. And I think that discipline really helped me. But I think I agree with you, Meghann. And I can't remember where, but I know I've done content at some point recently where I was saying about, the thing about fear and anxiety is that sometimes you have to look down the barrel of the gun and you have to face it and be like, what is this thing that I am fearful about? But I definitely had a turning point, I think at some point around the middle of last year, where it just like, it's like the anxiety, it just ran its course. And it was, I had some massive personal breakthroughs in terms of like understanding myself during that period. And it was almost like everything just went a bit squiffy because these huge things were being downloaded to me. And so I would agree with you. I think we have to use those seasons of anxiety sometimes, where there's no obvious cause, where you're like, I'm a fairly stable and successful person. I don't really understand where this is coming from. But it definitely felt like something that I was able to use to just certain things about my big picture as a person slotted into place last year. And I was just like, how, like, I've been alive for 40 years. How have I only seen that this year? But that's the journey, isn't it? That's what happens when you really commit to personal growth. And so, yeah.
Yeah, you can be ignorant. You can be ignorant if you want.
Yeah. And I think as well, like I'm a real believer in sort of talking therapies. I think one of the reasons that I get anxious in the first place is because I like to think that if I think about it for long enough, I can figure it out. But I think one of the big things that I learned through this whole thing was like, I've been looking at this for 40 years. I
Right.
never saw that. I never understood that. So it was I look back on it and I'm just actually quite thankful, because that's the thing. I think that is, to me, it's the longest, most intense period of anxiety really that I can remember,
Me
where
too.
I have the tools to, like, in theory, be able to do this. I lived in perpetual anxiety for the first 27 years of my life, and I didn't really know what it was or what the problem was. And I think I was just like, why is this happening now? Because I've done so much therapy. I understand myself so well. This shouldn't really happen. But at the same time, now, even, like 12 months down the line, I can look back and be like, oh no, that was definitely for a purpose.
Absolutely. And I was going to say, I think that when your anxiety was tapering off, you must have passed it to me
You're
somehow. So
welcome.
thanks for that. I appreciate that, because mine started the second half of the year and just kind of took me aside, kind of hit me like a tidal wave at about
Mm.
July. So thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry about that. I
Just
wasn't I
kidding.
wasn't conscious of doing it.
I know you
So,
weren't.
but
You
yeah,
didn't even know
it's
till right
useful
now.
anxiety. Receive it with joy. Yeah.
Oh, I did. So what's interesting and what I got most from what happened last year, and it's like you said, what's important is what did we discover in this? Because it's most of the time it's not for naught. There's a reason. And we don't sometimes ever understand that reason. We just have to trust, but sometimes we do figure it out. So for years, I can remember working with my healer who actually lives in England with you, not with you, but you would know that if he lived with you.
I was gonna
Um,
say.
but he said to me for years, he said, well, why wouldn't you want to work toward having a week off per month? Why wouldn't you start doing that now? And I'm like, I can't possibly. I have too much work to do. I never have enough days in the week to get all the things done that I have to. And I'm already blah, blah, blah. So I worked for years to get myself to the point where I could take Fridays off. And generally
Mhm,
speaking, I do a pretty good job of it. There are
mhm,
times when I'll go out for, lunch and dinner and things with colleagues, breakfast, but that's for fun for me. I love having relationships with the people who are in my professional world as well as my personal. I blur the lines. Let's just say there
mhm,
aren't lines. So for me, what happened was it wasn't until November of 2022 when I had since July just perpetual anxiety and fear coming up. I had also run my first multinational conference for the dames, and it went great. And I was not in the greatest financial situation prior to it, so I went into that with a ton of fear. Long story short, I got to the point where I had a panic attack, and it was right before I was about to get on a plane, not like the day, but the day before I was supposed to get on a plane to go to one of my chapter events. And I had this panic attack and I had to cancel everything for that week
yeah.
because I couldn't do anything. I was like, that it was such a panic attack that I realized if I keep doing this to myself, I will have another burnout like you have had. I will have that. And I don't want that. So I unplugged from everything. I told my team, I said, I'm sorry, I have to do this. I took social media off my phone. I took email off my phone. I took everything off my phone and I unplugged. And it was really hard for the first couple of days. I kept trying to intervene in things with my team because I'm so habituated to being involved. And
Yeah.
finally, I like heard while I was in meditation, you've got to stop. You've got to let go completely and unplug. And at that moment, I took 5 days off uninterrupted and stayed home. I've never done a staycation, never, ever in my life. And I did. And I sat around and I read, and I swear there's an end to this story. But what I learned in that process was if you don't plan it for yourself and if you don't make it happen, this thing that you really want from your business and that you want in your life, the universe will come along and will make it happen for you somehow. And it's
Mm,
going to be a lot easier if you just choose it. So
yeah.
maybe you should just choose it. So now, I guess, again, I'm grateful that that's how it happened and it didn't happen by something worse. And I have now taken off the fourth week of every month from here on out.
Yeah.
And it's
I
beautiful.
love
And
that.
that's what I've wanted. And I have so much more creativity in the space that I've been wanting for
Mm.
years. And I have that now.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's really important. And I don't know, as you were saying that, Megan, I was like, I'm fairly sure my whole life is like one giant staycation because I'm such a home bird. And like, I live next to a massive national park as well. And like, when we first moved here, I kept saying to my husband, this is like all of my childhood holidays. I feel like we're driving back to a holiday house and we're really driving back to our actual house. Like, I don't get this. But I really resonate with that as well because again, in 2021, like I went through like a phase of like trying to work through like really get my schedule under control, and I was struggling to do it. It was a really difficult thing, and I got to a point where I was like, I think I just need to like cut my week in half. I can only work afternoons. That's the solution I can see to this problem. And I looked at it and I was like, I can never do that. That is just impossible. But literally within 3 weeks, I had made it happen. And I think it's when we look at something, we're like, I can't have the thing that I want. And I think one of my big learning points, and I think it links into this thing of like, we are enough, is that actually we can do anything that we choose at any moment. And we stack up all these reasons why we can't have the things that we want. But I think there's also a narrative in there about, you know, in order to get the things that you want, you need to be different. You need to like lose a lot of pounds. You need to like have a better routine. You need to like be in control of what you look like, all these kinds of things. Be a more impressive person. I've dined out on that for several years. And I think like really, I feel like just some switch like flipped for me in December. And I was like,
That's the
so
lie.
done.
Yeah, that's the lie that's been running the show, that's been underneath everything that we didn't even know that was running it. But you're absolutely correct. It's that whole thing we were talking about at the beginning of scarcity coming up and running the show, because we've been more conditioned as a society, as women especially, to feel like we are less than, and to feel like we can't possibly do X until Y happens.
Exactly.
And I know that men face that as well, but I think women have a special cocktail of crap
I definitely
in that regard.
Do. Yeah. And like, I think that it's really easy, isn't it, to just be like, well, I don't really feel worthy of these things. But a massive gift that we can give ourselves is actually just getting to that place of being like, I am enough. I'm like, to be honest, I'm probably more than enough. Like I could have done this already.
And that's where all the hesitation comes from, right there. If we don't believe, because I hear people, you know, who are watching us, and thank you for our live listeners. We're excited to have you.
Hello, Gamara. It's lovely to have you with us.
Yes, we are just looking at things and saying, okay, if we are not enough, then how can we move forward with anything that we want? We can't. That therein lies the problem. So we have to, okay, I'm just going to say have to, but we get to choose to decide that we are through with not feeling like enough, because quite honestly, it's insane to feel not enough or enough either way. Because who's defining this? Who's defining what's enough and what's not enough?
I feel that so strongly. And like, to me as well, it links to intuition and self-trust, because I have, and I think this happens every time we up level. I have had seasons in my business where I've been like, every flipping email I get, I'm like, I do not know what to do about this situation. And it's not like bad things. It's just like, do you want to speak at this thing? And you're like, I don't know you. Like, And I think when we are, for me, I think when I've been stuck in like, I don't know if I'm enough, and we get messages. I've had a ton of messages since I started my business, because when you raise your vibration in that way, you piss a few people off, and like that comes back on you. And it's taken me time to be like, do you know what? That's not about me. That's about them. And like,
what other people think about me is none of my business. One of my
exactly. And it's none of my concern. It's literally not worth like having, and it's so like, it's one of those paradoxes, isn't it? Because when you get to that point, it's so empowering to not care, but like, oh, how'd you get there? And you have to keep taking the next step and doing the work.
And getting punched and getting kicked down and then coming back up again.
And just being like, nope, I'm getting back up again. I mean, I think being a business owner makes you like crazy resilient anyway, because there are so many knocks along the journey, but you do get to a point where you can just brush them off. And
but I do agree. And I remember a mentor of mine saying many, many years ago, once people start being haters, you're onto something. When you start having haters that are, talking smack. And it's, unfortunately, it is the part of the human condition. Some people are conditioned to. It's the ego's response to man, I'm jealous, or I'm having comparison, that's the thief of my joy, or whatever, bad habit, belief that's running the show for that person. And so again, it's their stuff, it's their content, it's not actually ours. And yet we take it personally. And that's why one of the 4 agreements is don't take it personally. But it is super hard to do that for a while. And then it is just a matter of everything that we need to practice in life or everything that we want to attain is worth practice.
But I think it's almost that it's that state, isn't it? Like for me, when I started my business, I was so unsure if I could actually do it. So I went into stuff like, and I think people fed off that energy of like, this person is not sure about themselves. And I look back on that version of me and I just think like, good for you, because you flipping did it anyway. And that like, it's so much courage. And I think at the time I just felt like, oh my gosh, I'm rubbish at everything. And it's like, it doesn't matter, because you showed up and like, you sometimes got the negative feedback and you showed up anyway. And like, I think that is one of my like real strengths. I'm so stubborn. It's like, try telling me I can't do something, I will do it. But like, also I think it's being, and I'm sure you feel this too, Meghann, being at a stage of business where like I've been doing this 9 years. There are very few things that haven't happened to me or happened to people that I know. And so it's not that kind of like rabbit in the headlights, I don't know what to do. And I think that's the thing. This last year, I really kind of got to a place of like, I do know what to do. I can hear my intuition. It's telling me this situation, there's no evidence at the moment, but this situation, there's something. And then something happens and you're like, I knew it. I was right. And I think what has started to shift for me is that I've been listening to my intuition more, instead of doing what I was doing before, not listening to it and being like, I have a feeling that something's up, but who am I to think that? Then something like goes completely wrong and you're like, I knew it. Why didn't I listen to myself? So I think it's getting practiced at trusting your intuition. I've had a lifetime of people telling me that I'm wrong about stuff. I'm getting it wrong. I'm overreacting. I'm actually very, very good at smelling bad situations. Like I can tell you that something is going down. Like that doesn't endear you to a lot of people, unfortunately. But it's kind of it's something that I'm really starting to appreciate about myself, and I think like take pride in almost, and have like that self-compassion, rather than just be like, oh, I just imploded another thing. Why does this always happen?
Well, and appreciating ourselves and having that compassion for ourselves, because we're not going to be perfect and we are going to blow things up and we are going to do things that we didn't intend to do. But it's funny, while you were talking about that, I was thinking that's why this is the 6 and 7 Figure Women podcast, because we have, in my observation in running a multinational women's group with women running 6, 7, and 8 figure businesses, what I see is a large shift that happens when women reach multiple 6 figures. So it's about that 250K and up level. Things start to shift because the concerns that were concerns before are not really concerns anymore, because if you've done a lot of the work. This is why I say it's really important to do personal and professional growth work side by side as you grow, because you will hit limits with one and then with the other. And it's sort of like, if you've ever tried walking with one of those big rubber bands around your feet, and if you don't evenly move one leg, then the other, then the other, then the other, you're going to end up falling on your face. It's very similar with personal growth and professional. If you don't continue to go forward in that personal growth journey and deal with the demons, deal with the shadows, embrace who you are, then you can't possibly take that next step forward reliably in your business.
And I think it's true as well that the things we can be most fearful of are the things that actually, when we do that, when we look down the barrel of that fear, then you just think, oh, is that all? And it's so funny, isn't it? How like, I think we can be held in place. And I think for me, this is what like letting go of BS this year is going to look like. It's like, nope, I'm not going to be held back by that fear anymore. I'm not going to be sort of defining myself in the things that I fear that I'm not. I think that I'm ready to just do life without that layer of doubt and that layer of, are you sure? Like, I don't know if you should do this. It's like, yeah, you do know, so trust and move forward.
And part of that trust, sometimes in my situation, to be completely vulnerable, which is how I go, I had to get to a point where I just surrendered and said, okay, I had a friend recommend a great psychiatrist who does a genetic test that helps you then have an appointment with her where she can help figure out what antidepressant, anti-anxiety pills to be on that are going to be best with your metabolism and with your genetics. And I got
That's
to a point where I decided that that's what I needed to do. And it was a friend, a fellow dame, who said, why would you keep white knuckling when you don't have to?
Yeah.
And it's like, there are also realizations that we have as we grow. That's like, okay, I have some kind of a belief that's outdated, that's holding me back, which is I don't want to take pharmaceuticals because that means that I'm weak. And I realized in November-ish that was an old program that somehow came downloaded into me that wasn't mine and that I didn't really want to live by anymore. And now that I decided that, it's like that fog that I was in, that dense fog that I was in for 6 months is gone. And so now I can actually move forward with the other things that I'm wanting to manifest in my life.
I love that, Meghann. Okay. And I think that's really powerful because actually you can't mindset your way out of a mental health issue.
No.
Like, and getting the help that helps, whether it's like the mindset side, the spiritual side, or whether it's the medical side, and actually just getting medication that helps you. Like, one of the ways that my anxiety shows up for me is like chronic insomnia. And actually, I have like a prescription sleeping pill and it makes me sleep like a baby. And life just goes so much better when I'm getting the sleep that I need. I don't even feel bad about it. I'm just like, my GP is like fully on board, thinks it's a good idea too. We found a really safe way to do it. Like, we're monitoring it and all that kind of stuff. It's just
Same
like,
here.
Would I be in a better place if I was awake like half the night, every night, the way that I have been at times?
That's the worst part.
I don't think that that's more worthy or more noble. Giving ourselves what we need in the moment is so powerful.
Middle of the night waking up with anxiety is the worst because there's not really much you can do about things and you're not at full capacity with your brain. I did the same thing as well. As I was looking at all these different treatments, I found actually an antihistamine that works well for me, knocks me out, and I sleep the whole night. And that was the beginning of this journey. But that I would say with medicine. Prior to that, I had done 6 months of spiritual work and work with my therapist and all kinds of other help that just got to a point where I had tried the hormones, I had tried the psychiatry, I had tried the everything else, and it wasn't working. So that was, for me, an important thing to go through those steps before I would accept medication.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful gift to give to yourself, to be able to have what you need and then to be thriving because of it. Like, why would we not do that for ourselves?
Absolutely. So part of that, what we were talking about, has to do with, not feeling enough and having those decisions that we can make to really help ourselves feel better. But then the other question that I have for you around this is, what do you do when that inner critic starts to take over? Because just because we get into this new place of new habits doesn't mean it stops. But what do you do when it starts to take over? Because I think our listeners would like to know that as well.
Yeah. Well, so, a decent chunk of what I do with my clients is around like the mindset side, dealing with the inner critic, reframing stuff and like seeing it as it really is rather than seeing like the scarcity version of it.
Seeing the facts, not the feelings.
Exactly. But like, I had a really unexpected experience actually late last year during I'm doing an executive coaching qualification this year, which we're doing a module this week actually, and it's like, I think now I've done one, I'm prepared for it. Like, the first one I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I love this, I hate this, what's going on? And it was all the emotions, cried so much. I was like, oh, this has been the best week ever. But during one of like the exercises actually that we did with that, we were like splitting off into pairs, and I was paired with someone, and we were talking about something where my inner critic came up, and he just looked at me and he said, yeah, but that's not true. And I was like, that is so simple, but so profound. And like, I think it's also like a byproduct of, I've been doing serious like personal work behind the scenes. I had massive breakthroughs, like I said, last year. But I also just noticed certain things that had been traumatic memories. That's one of my things that I've loved to do to myself for my entire life, is replay like traumatic things in my head all the time. And now when I start to do it, firstly, I'm like, oh my gosh, I must have stopped doing it because I've noticed that I've started doing it again. But you understand what it is, you understand where it's come from. But I had this thing of like remembering something that had been very hurtful to me. And out of nowhere, just this like inner voice made a joke out of it. And I was like, that's a new voice. That's not a voice that we've heard before. And so I think the reason I want to share that is because I think that like sometimes it feels like we're just sitting there and we're talking to ourselves and we're like, calm down, it's all going to be fine, don't worry. And like, you know, the inner critic is like, you're terrible, you can't do anything, this is a complete disaster. But like, I think what I'm starting to notice is that the years of doing that work with myself and going to therapy and sometimes taking the medication if I need to, but like doing the stuff like the daily exercise, really trying to eat well and eating mindfully, aware of the impact of certain foods and sugar, for example, on my body. That's a whole other episode, isn't it?
Yeah, we
like
had to talk about that.
Sugar and how that goes down. But like, I think the impact of all of these little things is that I am genuinely seeing progress in ways that I never even imagined. And the fact that I was able to take something that had been so traumatic and just almost poke fun at it. And I was like, in that instant, it's like it's shattered. And I was like, you will not have control over me in that way anymore. Like something just, and I was like, where did that even come from? That's crazy. So yeah, we've just had a question in the comments. How about self-sabotaging? I do that all the time. Oh my gosh, yes. And I think like all of my clients and me, probably all of us in the universe, like we experience that urge to self-sabotage. I think for me, it has been centered around being willing to receive and being able to comprehend that I am not in a car crash, like, you know, heading for the precipice. I'm on a trajectory of growth and positive change and success in my life. I couldn't have said that a year ago, I would have died. Like, just being able to acknowledge life is going in a really good direction. Yes, there's ups and downs, there's hard things, there will always be hard things. But being able to see that and not feel the need to mess it up because I can't, you know, when we're always waiting for the other shoe to drop and when we're thinking, this is too good to be true, like this is a mistake, and the imposter syndrome kind of comes in. Meghann, what's your take on all of this?
I think I completely agree. And I think the key here, my husband has that sweet self-revenge of self-sabotage. And I don't have it very often or very much, but I watch him, and what I see to be very helpful is when he can start recognizing the early moments of self-criticism, because it usually starts with the early moments of self-criticism. And I'm not doing this right. Or maybe for our user who is saying that, maybe it's comparison for you, or maybe it's blame for you, but there's some kind of behavior that starts to happen that's out of the norm of your higher self, what we talked about at the beginning. So we could also have a whole nother episode about parts work, but there's a part of us that when we were little, we had these habits ingrained in us that caused us to have certain behaviors, and we can stop those behaviors by recognizing them and then unblending from them. Parts work is a phenomenal tool. And if I can think of the book that is great, I'll say it. But what I would say is also, once you can recognize the early signs of self-sabotage, whatever that looks like, whatever sweet flavor that is for you, don't be shameful. Try to be super compassionate with yourself. B, if you can sit down and write down in a journal, what are the things that you're seeing and feeling? And then go back. So write down, just stream of consciousness for 2 to 3 minutes, what it is that you're seeing. And then go back and circle the facts and see how much of it is actually fact and how much is actually fiction. And then congratulate yourself for writing a great short story, because the vast majority of it is probably fiction.
Yeah. I think that's the really powerful thing, that when you start to come out the other side, and I'm talking about it like it's a one-time thing. It's not, it's a cycle that we're in all the time.
Absolutely.
Like every time you up level, all the wheels fall off again. It's completely normal to feel like, you know, and you think, why is this happening? I did this work already. But like, it really is that kind of sit down with it every time that it happens. Make sure that you're getting really present with yourself, because I think it's almost like we have like an old tape playing, and it's time to switch it off and be like, that may have been true like 25 years ago. Look how much growth has happened in that time. That does not need to be true for you today.
This is where I do agree with and I don't agree with that when you grow in business, it's just the same problems with another zero at the end. Because in some ways it is, and in other ways, if you are, as long as you're doing what we've been talking about, which is that personal growth, you'll have a whole new level and set of tools to go through this next. I always think of it as like an adventure, right? Like we're in Indiana Jones and we're going through the next crusade, and we have new tools this time, and we have new knowledge, and we have the understanding that while it sucks while we're going through it, we will make it through. We are not going to die from this thing that's happening in our brains. It's just brain patterning that's happening. And sometimes it can be really helpful to get help with that brain patterning, whether you're doing EMDR or you're doing brain spotting or you're doing EFT. There's so many different things that you can do because there's so much going on in our brains at any given time. So the last topic we really want to look at is, as we're women business owners and as we're growing our businesses, we are always told to run our businesses by the numbers. That is something that we hear frequently. And I have a belief that there are times when we have to run our businesses by our intuition versus the numbers. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on that statement.
So I think that I love numbers, which is weird because I'm not like a mathematical person. I'm like a very much arts, like literature type person. But I do love one of the geeky things that I love to do is every time I make a sale, the first thing I do is I go and I update my spreadsheet and I have a little party like, yay, look at these numbers. But I think I believe that you should run your business on your energy. And the battle needs to be for the energy and making sure that you're doing the mindset work, that you're not going into stuff being like, oh my gosh, I can't be bothered. Whenever you get that falling through the floor energy feeling, like that's a problem. That's the thing that needs to be addressed, because really the numbers just tell the story of how well you've managed to do that process. I think that you should always know the numbers like completely. I think every month you should look for the year ahead and be able to say, look, this is where things are dropping off. So that's where we need to put some attention ahead of time, preferably not in the moment. But for me, like it's the energy first, and the numbers just tell the story of whether that's been successful. How about you, Meghann?
Yeah, it's interesting because what I've realized with this is that plans have failed for me time and time again. They've also worked for me time and time again. So last year in my team, we had plans for migrating our email and CRM system to a whole new system. And our key team member who was in charge of that migration had a family emergency. And something that was set to be completed at the beginning of November still isn't complete. And it seems for me, the more concrete that I try to be with my plans, the less they come to fruition in the way that I expect. And speaking of expectation, for me, it never trumps intuition and flexibility, personally or professionally.
Yeah.
Because just another quick story. We also last year had a plan and had hired a consultant to turn a lot of our finances into an automated system so that it could speak to a Google spreadsheet, which would catch payments that were failed and do things from an automated perspective so that we weren't having to have our bookkeeper spend so many hours on things. Well, there's another perfect example where one piece of the technology had an update and broke the whole entire system. And so when I got to fourth quarter last year, which was, as we have already previously mentioned, the worst quarter for me mentally and emotionally, I couldn't even tell you what my numbers were because the system had gotten so broken that the only numbers I had to rely on were what was in my bank account. And that wasn't good enough for me to feel stable and secure. and to trust in myself that I had done enough, I had saved enough in my business operating account that I could ride through any storm. So I wasn't even able to, at that time, make any decisions based on the numbers. I had to make it 100% based on my intuition. And that intuition and flexibility that I have learned to tap into over the last 10 years as a business owner as well have shown me that the best plans are, well, I can't remember what the dang saying is now. I always mix up sayings, but
It's
have
like
plans.
best laid plans, ... isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that is what happens to me frequently. So for me, what's best is if I have a mix, a mélange of here are my intentions and my goals. And I have a lot of flexibility in that I am not a bad person. My team is not incompetent. Things are not wrong if we don't hit those numbers, if we don't do these things. And that's not how I operated in the beginning. I operated thinking I'm a failure because I would set these atrocious goals for myself of, expanding 300% in a year. And that's not realistic, A, when you're a solopreneur, but B, it's just when we don't have an understanding of the numbers and how they actually work, we tend to set these goals and plans, and we have to ride by the plans. But I do think it's incredibly important as business owners grow that we have to understand our numbers. And if you don't understand them, I can honestly say that I don't understand them through and through. I do not have a PhD in my business finances, but I do have someone on my team who does. And she is able to really translate things for me in a way that I can understand, because I am a linguist, and that is where my genius is in communication, as you can see by how much I love to talk. So anyways, it's just this whole, I think that it is important to have the blend, but also to realize that we shouldn't feel bad or blame ourselves. And that, yes, I have intention with how I approach my husband in my relationship. But if I have expectation tied to that intention, it almost always thwarts me. And it leaves me feeling very uncomfortable and very unhappy, because expectation is another one of those things that we talked about earlier. That's like, according to what terms? Expectations are according to this system that we have built in our brains based on 40 years or however old you are of programming. But my expectations can never be met by you, because you haven't lived the same life that I have lived, and you don't have what's in my head. So it's another thing that just ends up hurting us more than it helps us.
Yeah, it's that need to be unattached, isn't it? I think that's been a really big learning point for me over the last couple of years. I think I was always like, it has to be like this. It has to be this. Everything was rigid and really firm. And I think what I'm learning to do little by little is just be like, this is my intention. I'm open to this. Anything that like falls within that category would achieve that goal. It doesn't always have to be the very narrow thing that I have sorted out. And the last thing I'd like to say actually on numbers, as you were talking, Meghann, like it kind of occurred to me, like the other angle on this is that I think the thing that we can also feel like is that we have to always have big numbers of leads. We have to have big numbers of clients. We have to have big numbers of everything. I actually have a 7-figure business plan in place that involves 17 clients at any one time. Like, it doesn't always need to be like, you must get like the best engagement on LinkedIn. You must get like the most followers. Like those things, they can be great. It's nice. I have a lot of LinkedIn followers. I'm very fortunate in that. I have more than most people that I know. That doesn't actually, it's not a metric for anything. It's a really awesome thing that I'm super thankful for. But like, I think one of the things that I've been working towards is probably changing my expectation around what numbers mean and what they have to be. I think applying flexibility in that, for me, that's been an absolute game changer.
And I think simplicity is a key of what you just said too, because notice when you said your plan for 7 figures does not involve 72 different offerings. It involves one. And I think as women, we try to do and have as people, we just do. But we have this belief that we have to do, first of all, I think it's an old thing that really we can do ourselves some favors, and women who cross from 6 to 7 figures figure this out. We cannot customize everything that we do for everyone that we meet, and we have got to be here to serve a specific kind of market. So in the Dames, we are here helping those women, and our specialty is in helping women who've crossed 250K to get past 7 figures and to keep growing to whatever level they're desiring to grow to. And that has to be done through a few things, like simplifying what it is that you do, identifying who you do it for specifically, and then speaking to the needs, wants, and desires of that audience. Because otherwise you will just run yourself ragged and crazy trying to do all these different things that are directed to all these different people, and it's impossible to systematize and scale.
And I think actually a big part of that, and I think where I've come to with a lot of my indecision last year and struggling to know what to do about certain things, the word that I've recovered is no. No, I don't do that. No, I can't do that. No, I won't do that. And I really do think that so much abundance is locked up in our ability to use the word no.
Yeah. And we have a great question from Alistair. He said, quality versus quantity. Totally agree. Is there a good way to help others share that mindset? Some people have approached me recently wanting really high event attendee numbers when I focus on helping with quality organic leads. And I think that that's about declaring, in my perspective, in my experience, it's about declaring the kinds of clients that you want to work with, Alistair. So if for you, it's important to have your clients understand that smaller events with smaller attendees that may be higher cost are better for them, and here's why, then that would become part of your branding, and that would become part of this is what our message is. And I think what we are afraid of sometimes as business owners is to be contrary, to say things that our clients don't want to hear. And I can remember as a marketing coach, that was one of the first things that I did, was demystify a lot of the beliefs that are surrounding marketing, and unraveling my clients' beliefs and expectations about what marketing can do for you right off the bat. Because if they were wanting unrealistic things, like, Alistair, I love when clients would come to me and say, I have a retreat in 2 months and I need to fill it. How many people do you have registered? 2. How many are you wanting? 25. Wow. And you're 2 months away. And how big is your list? Oh, 200 people. So I think there's expectations, and there's a need for us as the business owners to put a stake in the ground and say, this is who I'm here for and who I'm here to impact. Here's my message, and here's why, because I'm an expert and this is what I know. And doing so by connecting that bridge of here for our target audience and for what we are great at and what our area of expertise is and our sweet specific sauce is. That's where the marriage comes together, and we don't have to deal with convincing anyone of anything anymore.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I see a lot with my clients, and this is a classic 6 to 7 figure transition thing, is that actually you can build a really nice $200,000-$300,000 revenue business based on who comes in the door, what do they ask me for? Yes, I'll do it. And actually starting to build with intention. And I think what you're saying there, Meghann, exactly, like, if someone asks for this, the option is, do I do that or do I not? It's not automatic. And so even though it can feel really counterintuitive to be like, no, thank you, big shiny event, I don't really want to be part of that because it's not what I do. Sometimes that can be the absolute best thing for your brand and for your niche. Because if people, like, I actually think saying no in those situations gives people a really clear idea of what you actually are there to do. And once people understand that, they can start referring better fit clients to you. And it's not this thing of like, I just do anything, it's fine, anything that you want, I'll do.
Exactly. And I think that I've had a lot of experience in developing power partnerships, which is what we do in the Dames, with others who do the same thing that I do, but for a different target audience. So for instance, a lot of people come to me and they've said, well, what about the women who aren't yet at 6 figures and they need community and they need support? And I say, yes, there are so many great groups out there who that's their focus. And they're much better at it than I am, because that's not what my mission is. My mission is to get more women from the top 15% into the top 2% of women-led businesses. And I let them do the things that they're great at. And I refer people to them. And I am fully, that's going back full circle to abundance. I believe that that is an abundant attitude, that somebody else is going to do a much better job serving them. And so I'm going to serve them by saying, this is not actually what we do. And I'm not going to create a whole new product arm for women who run 5-figure businesses who need to convert to that 6-figure level.
Yeah. And it feels hard, I think, when you first start doing that. I don't know, Meghann, you might be a lot better at this than I am, but I think, saying no to stuff, it can feel like, no, that's the wrong direction. I shouldn't be doing that. But I really do think a lot of abundance comes when we learn to use the word no and apply it consistently.
Yeah, I struggled with it for sure in the beginning with my marketing business. But when I started seeing the results of what happens when you say no and you refer out instead, and what that opens up, because the universe says, I do see what you want. And you start attracting more of those people. It can feel really uncomfortable in the beginning because you're like, oh my gosh, I just turned down whatever, $12,000, or I just turned down XYZ. But when you see on the other end, when you apply that consistently, that saying no consistently, what you see on the other end is 3, 4, 5 times more abundance coming to you in different ways, including your own self-sanity and energy.
Because you may have got the money, but you've lost the energy. And that's the whole game, isn't it?
And chances are the money wasn't worth it, because you're going to have to put 80% more effort into those people than you would your ideal clients, who you'd put 20% of that same amount of effort into, because they're the right people for you. And that wasn't a good example, but you know what I'm saying. You'll end up losing a lot of value and a lot of money because you've taken on a client that's not a great fit.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're out of time, aren't we, Meghann?
Yes. Oh, gosh. I wish we could just talk for hours, but I think that this has been a wonderful conversation, and I'm so excited for the rest of our conversations to come this year, and the focus that we've got on especially women who have crossed over that 7-figure mark. Because if we can start addressing those issues as we're in the mid to high 6 figures, it'll make the blow a lot smoother when we add that extra 0 at the end.
It definitely will. Thank you so much, everyone who's been here with us. Thank you for the questions that you've posted. It's been really fun just going through these and airing some of these issues. It's important, and these things don't get talked about enough online.
Absolutely. Enjoy until our next time.